Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. We're going to continue reading the book al-Ajwabah al-Jaliyyah fi al-Ahkam al-Hanbaliya by Alama Musa bin Issa al-Qaddoomi, rahimahullah. So let us begin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما ويقينا وفهما يا رب العالمين. قال المؤلف رحمه الله نفع الله به وبعلومه وعلوم مشايخنا في الدارين آمين. كتاب الحج, or the chapter of Hajj. We are reading from the Sheikh Khalid Shah translation, and this is page 127. And just quickly, this is the shortest chapter of the book, so inshallah we'll finish it in probably 2 lessons, and we may add 1 supplementary lesson and then be done with the book, inshallah ta'ala. We will not be going into all of these issues as deep maybe as in previous chapters, just because due to personal reasons I'm getting a bit busy, so I think we need to focus on finishing the book, inshallah ta'ala. So let us begin. Chapter on Hajj, section on the rulings of Hajj and Umrah. Question 100. What are the rulings of Hajj and Umrah? And the author replies, Hajj and Umrah are wajib, once in a lifetime, with the following 5 prerequisites: A. Islam, B. Soundness of mind, C. To have passed the age of puberty, D. To be completely free, and E. Ability. So just quickly, if we can define the meaning of Hajj and Umrah, if we look in Sharh of Daleel by al-Maqdisi, he says linguistically, Hajj refers to having the intention to go to someone who is held in high esteem, and Umrah linguistically means a visit. The actual Sharia definition of Hajj is intending to go to Mecca to perform specific acts at a specific time, whereas Umrah is to visit the Bayt, the house of Allah, according to a specific structure, or maybe we can say in a specific way. Now, as the author Rahmahullah mentioned, each one, Hajj and Umrah, are wajib, once in a lifetime, and the Taghlabi clarifies in the Sharh that this time should be also as soon as possible. So as soon as one meets these 5 conditions, he should then embark on the Hajj and Umrah. Now these 5 conditions that he has mentioned, we can divide them into some kind of categories. So for example, there would be a category of a condition that is needed both for the obligation, meaning the Hajj and Umrah to be obligatory, as well as that condition to be needed for something to be valid. So the first 2 conditions that were mentioned, al-Islam, yani being Muslim, and soundness of mind, these are 2 conditions that are required both for the Hajj or the Umrah to be obligatory, and if performed, for them to be valid. Now the next 3, to have reached the age of puberty, to be completely free, and to be able to do so, these are all related to obligation. So these 3 things have to be in place for the Hajj and the Umrah to be obligatory. These can further be divided into the conditions that are needed for that Hajj or Umrah to be counted as the one that is required once in a lifetime or not. So for example, to have reached the age of puberty and to be completely free, what it means is that if these things are not in place, number one, the Hajj and the Umrah are not obligatory. However, if you do them, they are valid, but they would not count as the one Hajj and the one Umrah that are required during the lifetime. Whereas ability, if it's not there, there's no obligation to perform the Hajj and Umrah, and we will define what ability is if you're just patient. But once again, there's no obligation to perform the Hajj and the Umrah, but if one does, it then would count as the wajib, the required Hajj and Umrah that needs to be performed once in the lifetime. And then the author, Rahimahullah, continues, Hajj and Umrah will be acceptable from a minor or a slave. However, it will not be counted as fulfilling the compulsory obligation. This is what we've already explained, maybe in a more complicated way. It's actually a more logical way, but one needs to just try to visualize these categories. As we said, what's required for obligation and for validity, and what's only required for obligation. And for the things that are required for obligation, then they break into what does not make obligation, nor would it count as the obligatory Hajj and Umrah, and the other which does not make obligation, but it would count as the obligatory Hajj and Umrah. The author then continues, Rahimahullah, anyone who has fulfilled the above 5 conditions is then obliged to perform Hajj and Umrah immediately, as long as the journey getting there is safe. Ability means that one has the provisions and transport for the journey and can provide for his family needs until his return. Now, when we mention ability, we can divide it into 3 subsections. Number one, that one has the provisions, so he has what he needs to meet his needs on the journey, such as food, such as accommodation. Number 2, that he has transport for the journey. And number 3, that he can provide for his family's needs or his dependents' needs until his return, so for that whole journey. Now with regards to transport, the exception would be someone that is living within the distance from Mecca, where one would not be a traveler, meaning you've not reached the distance of shortening prayers from Mecca. In that case, having transport would not be an obligation because you can walk that distance. But that itself has an exception in case one has some kind of difficulty, maybe they have a disability or due to age, etc. And Shaykhuna Dr. Mustafa Hafidhullah, he has mentioned one other thing here, which is not in al-Ajwaba, and it would have been useful to be here, and you will see it also in most of the longer fiqh books, that for the women it is an obligation to have a mahram travel with them. And mahram is not as some of the contemporary understanding of mahram. The man in the travel agency is not your mahram unless he's actually your unmarriageable kin, such as your husband. I mean, that one's different, you're married to the husband, or the father or the brother, etc. However, in the case that a woman performs the Hajj or the Umrah without a mahram, it would count for her, although it would be considered a sinful journey. And then Shaykhuna Dr. Mustafa Hafidhullah, he's also mentioned here another useful thing, that if one dies before having performed the Hajj or the Umrah, then some money should be taken out of his inheritance to pay someone to do it on his behalf. And the person who does it on his behalf can be a man or a woman. But once again, if it's a woman, then she should also have the mahram, as we've mentioned before. And having this person to do it on your behalf would also be valid for the person who is advanced in age or very sick and weak from some type of sickness where one does not have any hope to recover from. And the person that's doing Hajj on behalf of another person, he should be or she should be traveling to and from the same country of the person who they're doing it on their behalf, and that person should have also already done their obligatory Hajj and Umrah. Now, if you're following along with the book Daleel a-Talib, you're going to notice we're making quite a big jump. This chapter or this book is quite summarized. I don't want to get too much into the reason why, but I think that on one hand, if you want to be able to perform the Hajj or the Umrah, it is a bit easier to hit your minimal things as opposed to something like prayer, where in the prayer, for example, you have all these different arkan and wajibat and sunun, and then the conditions. And even if you go to the conditions, you start looking at something like the tahara, then this has its whole section of fiqh that one also has to understand. So the fiqh is a bit more straightforward, and I think it is a bit easier to kind of cover your basic things to get a valid Hajj or Umrah. But that said, people who go on these journeys, they usually, number one, study a bit more ahead of time, and it is also the preferred thing to do is that you go in a group that is being led by someone who has a bit more knowledge on the issue than a layman. Could be a more senior student of knowledge or a sheikh or an imam, but the point is that it's always better to go in that kind of a group if one is able. But still, as I said, if you master a few points, you can most likely have a successful Hajj and Umrah, and Allah knows best. Anyways, as I said, we will be skipping a few parts, so it's not just skipping, but this is also another issue where you're going to see some of the order of things are different. So if we look in Daleel a-Talib, there will be a section on the ihram, which is not in this book, and then we will talk about the mahdurat al-ihram and the fidya. So what are the prohibited things in ihram and what is the compensation for that, which will be in this book, but it's now put after this section on the pillars of the Hajj and Umrah and also their wajibat, obligatory actions. So now we go back to our core text, the arkan or the pillars of Hajj and Umrah. Question 101, how many arkan of Hajj and Umrah are there? Of Hajj are there? First we're going to take Hajj. And the author, Rahimahullah, replies, there are 4 arkan of Hajj. They are A. Ihram, i.e. intention to enter into the Hajj and Umrah rites. And just a quick note here, if you're reading from the Sheikh Khalid Shah translation, I have noticed between page 127 and 128, the numbering or the ordering is different. It's going from A to EFG. So yeah. Anyways, okay, the next one, E, wuquf, literally standing, meaning staying at Arafah. Its timing is from the start of Fajr on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah until the start of Fajr on the 10th. F. Tawaf al-Ifada of the Kaaba. It starts from midnight of the eve of Eid. And Sa'i, which is walking between Safa and Marwa. Now regarding the first rukn, which is the ihram, and this is the intention. So if one leaves this out, then he hasn't even begun the Hajj. And once one has made this intention, nothing would invalidate it except for apostasy. Na'udhu billahi min dhalika. Now regarding the standing at Arafah, when you are there, you will see lots of signs around that delineate where is the boundary of Arafah. So you need to make sure that you are within the area that is considered Arafah. As I said, that's delineated. You'll see it when you're there. So it starts from the sunrise the day of Arafah, which is the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, until the start of Fajr on the 10th, which is the Eid day. So 9th and 10th are the important days to know in the timing of the Hajj. 9th of Dhul Hijjah is the day of Arafah, and 10th is the Eid day. And it is sufficient, we're saying sufficient here, this is just the minimum standard, but sufficient that one would just be at that point in Arafah, in the boundaries of Arafah, even just for a moment, even if he was walking, even if he was sleeping, even if the woman was in this state of menstruation, even if one were there but they were not sure if they were within the boundary or not. Knowing that you're there is not the condition. Being there is the condition. And being in Arafah is very important, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, al-Hajj Arafah. Hajj is being in Arafah. Now regarding the third pillar, it is Tawaf al-Ifada, and this is also called Tawaf al-Ziyara, so don't get confused that they're two different things, just they're known by two different names, or it's known by two different names, and its timing starts from the middle of the night of the night of the Nahr, and if whether we say night or day of the Nahr, this day of Nahr, this is another name for Eid, because the Nahr is the slaughter, because on that day of Eid, we slaughter. And it doesn't have an ending time that it has to be completed by, and it's best to perform it during the day of Nahr, the day of Eid. So once again, as we've explained before, in the Islamic timing and calendar, a new day starts after the Maghrib, and then would go to the next Maghrib. So the night of that day, meaning like as in the day of the week, the night of that day is preceding the daytime of the day, if that makes sense. And finally, the fourth thing is the Sa'i, and this is traveling between the two hills. This is, you've probably seen this on TV where people are walking in that kind of long hallway thing. So you walk between Safa and Marwa. You walk 7 times starting in Safa. So Safa to Marwa is 1 time, then Marwa back to Safa is 2. So when you do the 7, it means you will start at Safa and end in al-Marwa. And now the author, Rahimahullah, he will go to the next question, 102. How many arkan does Umrah have? And he replies, Umrah has 3 arkan. They are Ihram, Tawaf, and Sa'i. So this is the same list as what we've mentioned for Hajj, except there's no wuquf, no standing at Arafah. The other thing to mention is that if you are following along with Daleel a-Talib, it's going to talk about the arkan or pillars of Hajj, and then it's wajibat, and then go to arkan of Umrah, and then it's wajibat, so the order here is a little bit different. And the author goes on, wajib acts of Hajj and Umrah, question 103, how many wajib acts are there in Hajj? And he replies, there are 7 wajib acts of Hajj. They are A. Ihram from the miqat or boundary of the holy sanctuary. B. Wuquf or standing at Arafah for part of the night if one stayed there in the day. And then C. Staying in Muzdalifah on the eve of Eid till midnight for those who stayed there before midnight. D. Spending the nights of Tashriq at Mina. So these are the 3 days after the Eid. E. Stoning the Jamarat in order. These are the big walls. They used to be like pillars. Now they made them like walls. On the day of Eid, 10th, to stone the Jamarat al-Aqaba, which is closest to Mecca. On the 2nd day, the 11th, and in all subsequent days, one stones the first Jamra near Masjid Khif, then the central one, and then Jamarat al-Aqaba. Every Jamra is stoned with 7 stones that should reach the Jamra. F, to shave or trim the hair, and G, the farewell tawaf. And then the author goes on, question 104, how many wajibs of Umrah are there? And he replies, Rahimahullah, wajibs of Umrah are A. Ihram for Umrah from outside the Haram, and B. Shaving or trimming the hair. So there are these 5 miqat which denote the boundary of where you need to start to wear the ihram, and these 5 are Yalamlam, which is the miqat for the people of Yemen, Qaran al-Manazil, which is the miqat for the people of Najd, and then there is that Ark, which is the miqat for the people of Iraq. Please notice that Najd and Iraq are different places. Then there is Dhul Hulayfa, which is the miqat for the people of Medina al-Munawwara. And finally there is Al-Juhfa, which is the miqat for the people of Sham and Egypt. Now, it's not that common for people to go by vehicle, maybe with the exception if you're coming from Jordan. So if you're going by plane, usually the pilot will inform people that they're about to fly over one of these boundary areas. So if one isn't already in the state of ihram, then one needs to then get into the state of ihram then. And maybe if you're in an airline that's not like a Muslim airline, or they just don't care about it, maybe they won't tell you. In that case, it would be safer to make sure that you're in ihram before you reach that area. Or maybe if you have that kind of a screen that's showing you, where the plane is flying, you can probably ahead of time be ready for that. Allah knows best. I mean, this is just me thinking out loud of how we apply this with air travel. But as I said, I've been one time going to Hajj, and it was by plane, and the pilot told us we're about to cross over the specific miqat, so please be in the state of ihram, and it was no problem, alhamdulillah. So the next wajib act is the wuquf at Arafah. And this is it might be confusing because we've already mentioned it as a rukn, as a pillar, but if you recall, the pillar is just being there. The wajib part is being there for part of the night. Shaykh al-Qaddoomi, rahimahullah, he is using this language, al-wukuf bil-arafa, juz'an min al-layl liman waqafan naharan. So literally, he's saying yes, a part of the night for the person who was already there during the day. If we look in Daleel a-Talib, it's a slightly different wording. Al-wukuf ila al-ghurubi liman waqafa naharan. So almost, the same meaning, but expressed in a different way, that one would have to be there until the ghurub, or the sunset, for the person who's already there in the daytime. And then there's the staying at Muzdalifah. So we said from the midnight, for those who are already there before the midnight. And this is Laylat al-Nahar, or the night of Eid. And this place, Muzdalifah, is, I think, roughly halfway between Mina, the place where you see all the white tents, and Arafah. And then spending the nights of Tashriq at Mina. So we said these are the days after the Eid, and one should spend the 3 days there, but it's better, or you can, it suffices to be there for 2, but it's better to be there for 3. And then we go on to the stoning, and mashallah, there's a good benefit here that the author, rahimahullah, he has clarified that on this 10th of Dhul Hijjah, which is the day of Eid, one stones the Jamratul Aqaba. This is the one which is closest to Mecca. And then on the subsequent days of the Tashriq, so from the 11th onward, one then stones all 3, starting with the one nearest the Masjid al-Khif, which is nearest Medina, to Mina, and then goes to the central one, and then to Jamrat al-Aqaba, which is the one closest to Mecca. And as he specifies, each one is hit with 7 stones. And then shaving or trimming of the hair, I think this is clear. And if you're in Mecca, you will see many of these barbers not far away from the Haram to provide the service that people need, so don't worry about finding one. And finally, the Tawaf al-Wada', or the farewell Tawaf. And Tawaf again is just circling the Kaaba 7 times. Now, with regards to the first Tawaf that someone will do in Mecca, when they arrive to Mecca, this Tawaf al-Qudum, there are also some special sunnahs related to this one. So one of the important sunnahs is that the first 3 times you go around the Kaaba, you would go at kind of a brisker pace. This is for men. This would not apply to women, nor would it apply to the one who is already a resident of Mecca or an area near Mecca. And then it is also a sunnah to wear the rada', which is kind of like, it basically looks like a towel, to put it under the right arm and over the left shoulder. And once again, this is sunnah for men, and it's also a sunnah for men that when they wear the izar and the rida, rida, for the one wearing this izar, which is kind of like the lower towel, and the rida, which is like the upper towel, that they be white in color and clean. I mean, these are sunnahs, so if for some reason one can't get the white one, another color would suffice, but the sunnah is white and to be clean. And it's also a sunnah upon the start of ihram, when one is making that intention, and that is the intention for the Hajj or the Umrah, that one also starts the talbiyah, which is when you hear the people say labbaik Allahumma labbaik. So they repeat this from when they start the ihram. So anyone that leaves out one of the rukns, one of the pillars, it's just like in prayer, that Hajj or the Umrah can't be completed without it. And if one leaves out one of the wajib acts for the Hajj or for the Umrah, and even if this is out of forgetfulness, then he has to make a sacrifice, and upon making the sacrifice, his Hajj would then be sahih, or correct and valid. And just like a prayer, by leaving out a sunnah act, there's no penalty for that. Now we want to quickly get some supplementary material from Daleel a-Talib, just to look at what are the three types of Hajj, because a lot of these shorter books don't get into that, but there are three types. So the first one that we'll mention is a-Tamattu', and this is the most preferred one according to the Hanbali madhab. You may notice in some of the other madhab they prefer other ones, and I mean there's different reasoning. I mean it's more of a usuli discussion, but the point is, for us from Hanbali perspective, the best version to do is the Tamattu', and this means that one will enter ihram for Umrah during the months of Hajj, and these are Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and these 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. And one will do the Umrah, and then they will complete the Umrah and exit the state of Ihram. And they need only enter the Ihram during those months. There's not a problem if they exit the Ihram after those months of Hajj. And then within that same year where they've done the Umrah during the months of Hajj, they would then re-enter Ihram during the time of Hajj. Then the next best option is al-Ifrad, and this is where one enters Ihram for Hajj, completes the Hajj, then they enter Ihram for Umrah. And the third type is al-Qiran, and this is when one enters Ihram for Hajj and Umrah together, meaning this is like one Ihram or one intention, or that they make Ihram for Umrah, and when we say Ihram, it, as we said earlier, it means having the intention. So one makes the Ihram for the Umrah first, and then intends to have the Hajj then on top of it. However, the condition for this type is that one intends to do the Hajj before one completes, or we can say before one one does the tawaf of the Umrah. So if one has done the tawaf of the Umrah, they can no longer add the Hajj to the Umrah. And this Umrah, unlike the Umrah of Tamattu', it does not have to be performed during the months of the Hajj, which we've mentioned earlier. Another quick thing to mention is if one is performing the Tamattu' or the Qiran, they would also have to be doing a slaughter during the Hajj. So when we talk about the penalty for different violations, we will also see there are times that one may have to also do a slaughter, but the difference between that, if we call it like fidya, penalty slaughter, versus this slaughter for tamattu' and al-qiran, is that for the tamattu' and al-qiran, one is permitted to eat from that slaughter meat, whereas the fidya, penalty slaughter, one may not eat from. So we're going to conclude here. The next lesson, inshallah, we'll finish up looking at the mahdurat, or the prohibited things during al-ihram, and the fidya, or the penalty or compensation for doing those various acts that are permitted, if one does them. As usual, please don't forget me and your dua, nor our Muslim brothers and sisters, nor our scholars of this world and the next. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een.